Until recently, if you wanted an electric car with an official range of more than 400 miles, you needed more than £100,000. But we've seen some cheaper EVs break the 400-mile barrier recently. And today, we're in the south of France to see, perhaps, the 400-mile EV that we've been waiting for. This is the Peugeot E-3008, and in this video, we're telling you everything you need to know about it. But first, this video is supported by PodPoint, winner of our Best Home EV Charger Test 2023. Look in our description below to find out more. So the 3008 dates back to 2009, and that first generation model was an MPV. But then for the second generation model in 2016, it became an SUV. This is the third generation model, and you can have it as a fuel-powered 3008, or for the first time, you can have this fully electric E3008. And you can see it's got a similar silhouette to the second generation model, but the big change really is back here where you've got much more of a sloping roofline. So the first question is, has this sloping roofline really impacted on the boot space that's available in the 3008? Well, the first thing to point out is that if you want to open the boot, you can do it by kicking under the tailgate if you've got the key in your hand. There's a button inside, there's a button on the key as well. But if you want to use the button here, it's under this, which is the perfect place to trap all the wet muck from up on the road, which isn't very nice. But anyway, the boot itself offers 520 litres of storage, which is actually exactly the same as the 3008 from before. That's below the parcel shelf though, so you'd probably only really notice a difference between the two when piling it right up to the roof. And inside you can see it's a simple shape. You've got these two small storage compartments either side. You've got a height adjustable boot floor, and you can split fold the rear seats 40-20-40, so each individual rear seat can fold down independently, which is very handy. Overall, this is bigger than what you get in a Nissan Ariya, but a VW ID.5 is a little bit bigger than this, and a Model Y is much bigger still. There is also going to be a four-wheel drive version of the E3008, and if you go for that, then the boot space that's available will drop down to 470 litres. And what's annoying is there isn't a front boot under here, which is a shame. But anyway, other styling changes to talk through for this new third generation model. At the front, you've got narrower headlights than before, and an evolution of Peugeot's three-claw light signature here, and a generally reworked front end, now with the 3008 name displayed on the front. You have 6 colours to choose from, including this Obsession Blue, which, depending on how you look at it and how the light reflects off it, is either a blue or a kind of green. There's also either 19-inch or 20-inch alloys, depending on the spec that you go for. Now, of course, with Peugeot's new badge in the centre of them. And overall, in terms of dimensions, this is a little bit bigger than the previous 3008, but you'd struggle to notice it. It basically takes up a very similar amount of room on the road. Inside the new Peugeot E3008, you can see it has a similar look to other Peugeot interiors, but it's all been kind of modernised and brought up to date. So, compared to the previous 3008, that car had a driver display up here, and it had an infotainment system as well. But now you can see on the E3008, that's been brought into this massive curved 21-inch LED screen here to show your driver display and the touchscreen infotainment system. There are very good things about this layout. So for a start, you don't have a head-up display, but that isn't a problem because this driver display is actually really high up. So it doesn't block your view out of the car at all, but it means it's very easily within your line of sight. And also in Peugeots of old, it used to be really quite easy to get the steering wheel to block a huge part of the screen. But to be honest, that isn't a problem for me in my driving position at all. I can have the steering wheel anywhere, and I can adjust the seat in lots of different ways, and I still can't get it to block the driver display there. So that is good, and it's also big, it's clear, it's got nice graphics. And having the infotainment system up here also has some advantages as well, because that, again, like the driver display, is high up, it's easily within your line of sight. You don't have to look very far down if you need to check your navigation directions or anything like that. And you can see Peugeot has gone for this pretty good design of having the air conditioning either side of the main screen. Of course, it would be much better if there were separate physical controls for the air conditioning, but this seems like a very good compromise to have them as big buttons on a touchscreen either side, very visible. And also, the buttons do fall easily to hand from your driving position, with the infotainment system being this high up as well. However, the problem is, if you want to use Apple CarPlay, then the climate shortcuts disappear. And while CarPlay does run fairly smoothly, the system itself has been a bit laggy on this test drive that we've had. So it is packed with loads of features. There are lots of different menus and sub-menus. It's really got quite a confusing layout, which would be fine if the tech was absolutely bulletproof and lightning quick. But to be honest, on this test drive, it's been a little bit hit and miss, and it can be a bit slow in loading certain menus. What's also a bit frustrating is that you now have this new steering wheel in the E3008, and whereas before you had physical buttons on the steering wheel, now you've still got physical buttons, but they're on this flappy, tacky bit of plastic on the wheel, which just feels really cheap and not very nice to interact with. But at least they are not touch sensitive, so you do actually have to prod them to get them to do anything. What is good though is this iToggle panel down here. Now, we've seen this before in other Peugeots, and it's essentially this touchscreen panel down here which lets you customize and choose which shortcut buttons you have for various different functions on the infotainment system. And the good thing about it is, again, it falls easily to hand, and these icons are pretty big, to be honest, so even though it would be better if they were physical buttons, they're still easy to hit on the move while you're driving. And what is new for the E3008 is the fact that you can have 2 pages of these iToggles, which is very handy. So what's the rest of the interior like, aside from the technology? Well, it does feel quite nice in here. You've got this fabric on the dashboard. Now, it is a hard, hollow kind of plastic, essentially, but it's at least got a nice topping to it. The very top of the dashboard does feel quite plush. And it's dressed up fairly nice. It's got this interesting layout and design. And the other good thing is that you don't have to go for the range topping version of this car to get an interior that looks like this. In fact, the only real difference between Allure and GT, the entry-level car, and the range topping one, is the fact that this finish will be a bit different on the entry-level car, and there also won't be quite such a fancy ambient light show in here as what you get on this GT model. But everything else will be pretty similar. You'll get all the screens, you'll get all the technology, and it will all have the same build quality as well. And on quality, there are a few wobbly bits here and there, but overall it's fairly decent by electric SUV standards, and it's also quite practical. You've obviously got this big center console thing here, which gives you a fairly chunky storage compartment down here. You've got 2 cup holders, and this nicely padded armrest opens up to show another big storage compartment, although this is very chunky. So if you're sat in the passenger seat, it does rob a little bit of your side legroom here, but it's not really that bad. So all in all, technology, quality-wise, this is a fairly decent electric SUV interior, if not class leading in any one area. As we mentioned earlier, the dimensions of the new E3008 are very similar to the old car, but the distance between the front and rear wheels is slightly longer in this car, so that should mean there's more room in these rear seats. And to be honest, in terms of legroom, it is fairly generous back here, and plenty of space for your feet under the seat in front of you as well, even in its lowest position. It has a reasonably flat floor, although you can see this center console comes back quite far, so if you do have 3 passengers sat in the back, they'll still have to put their feet either side of this if you're sat in the middle seat here. In terms of headroom, you can see that on this range-topping GT model with this sunroof, the headroom is not amazingly generous. In fact, I can't put my head on the headrest and sit up straight without my head touching the roof lining here. So it's not fantastic, and if you are particularly tall, then there are other electric SUVs that are much more accommodating in terms of rear seat space, particularly a Model Y, a Nero EV. The E3008 doesn't seem to stand out in terms of rear seat practicality. So now, the important numbers. The E3008 will eventually be available in 3 main versions with 2 different batteries. So you will have an entry-level battery, which is 73 kilowatt hours. It also has a 207 brake horsepower electric motor driving the front wheels with a top speed of 105 miles an hour. It will do 0 to 62 miles an hour in 8.8 seconds. And the official range for that car is around about 326 miles, which is pretty good. But there will also be an E3008 long range, and that will have a 98 kilowatt hour battery with an official range of 435 miles, which is almost 100 miles further than a Tesla Model Y long range. And that isn't just amazing for Peugeot, but it seems like another massive leap forward for mainstream electric SUVs generally. There's also going to be another version of this car which uses the entry-level battery, but with an extra electric motor. So it will be four-wheel drive, and it will have more than 300 brake horsepower and do 0 to 62 miles an hour in around about 6.4 seconds. Those two other versions aren't going to arrive until 2025 though. So the car that we're driving here is the entry-level version. And the maximum charging speed of this car, by the way, is 160 kilowatts, meaning the fastest you can get a 20 to 80% charge is 30 minutes, which is fairly decent if not outstanding. You can have it with a heat pump in the UK, but it'll be an optional extra, costing £700. Of course, every new car is important, but the E-3008 seems particularly important and significant because this is the first car to market built on an entirely new platform for Peugeot and its parent company Stellantis. So it's called Stella, or STLA, and essentially it's underpinnings which can be used for cars of various different sizes and different shapes. It can take engines or pure electric cars as well, and it's eventually going to be used on tons of future products, not just from Peugeot, but from lots of other Stellantis brands as well, like Vauxhall, Jeep, Fiat. They will all feature this platform in the future. In fact, up to 2 million cars per year could have this platform underneath them. This, though, is the very first one to feature it. So, no pressure on this fancy new platform then. What is it like? Well, the first thing to point out is that most of the roads that we've been travelling on this test drive in the south of France have been pretty smooth and well surfaced. So we can't draw as many conclusions as we could as if we were driving this on our terrible roads in the UK. But we have driven it enough to realise that the ride isn't particularly amazing. Even on these smooth roads, it feels a little bit unsettled. And then when you do pass over an imperfection like a pothole or just a broken bit of road, then there's quite a thump from the suspension and it doesn't settle down quickly or easily afterwards. And while this isn't an uncomfortable car, it just doesn't offer a plush ride, and it doesn't feel as sophisticated or as settled or as comfortable as the best electric SUVs that this is up against. And in terms of handling, this isn't exactly going to set your heart alight if you're a driving enthusiast, to be honest, because this is a tall, really heavy electric car. So you can feel it leaning through corners. It's not as impressive to drive as something like a Model Y, which obviously isn't the final word in driving dynamics, but for what is a tall, heavy SUV, that is really fairly decent to drive. And the steering in the E-3008 is absolutely fine around town and at low speeds. It's very light, very easy to place this into parking spots and thread it through tight roads. But when you're going a bit faster, you're not entirely sure what the front wheels are doing. There are some different driving modes you can put it in. You've got Eco, Normal and Sport. But all Sport does is add a huge amount of really artificial weight into the steering, and it just doesn't feel very nice at all, to be honest. But perhaps driving dynamics isn't important for you when you're looking for an SUV, and this, like all other electric SUVs, is a very easy and simple car to drive. The brake pedal feel is actually pretty good, so you can be confident when you're stopping the car smoothly, and that's a real strength of this car. A lot of electric cars can be really grabby, it can be really difficult to judge how you can stop smoothly, but you don't have that problem at all in the E-3008. The brake pedal is very well judged. There's also 3 different levels of regenerative braking in the E-3008, but even in the strongest setting, it doesn't offer you a one-pedal driving function or anything like that. So if you lift off the accelerator, it won't actually bring the car to a complete stop. So it is a shame that it's not stronger than it is. But the E-3008 isn't terrible on the road, and the ride does improve at faster speeds when you're on the motorway. It's also decently quiet inside the car as well. But given the price, and therefore the rivals that it's up against, it's a shame it doesn't really stand out on the road. The E-3008 is available in 2 different trims, Allure and GT. Even if you go for entry-level Allure, prices start at £45,850. That is more expensive than a Tesla Model Y rear-wheel drive, and it's also more expensive than the most expensive version of a Kia Niro EV. And then it's £4,000 to jump up to GT trim. And the other thing to point out is that we only have the pricing for the entry-level version of the E3008. There's going to be a long-range version with the bigger battery, as we said. There's going to be a more powerful version, and they will be even more expensive than this. So if you're looking for a cheap, value-focused electric SUV, this isn't the car for you. The E3008 is smart up front, and the 435-mile official range from the upcoming long-range version is hugely impressive. But this new electric Peugeot doesn't really stand out in any other respect. And really, it's the punchy pricing which dampens the enthusiasm for this car. Thank you very much for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there and make sure you're subscribed to our channel to see all of our videos as soon as they go live. And if you want to find out even more about the E3008, and if you want to get a great deal on your next car, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.